1 o'clock. Hi everyone. My name is Philip Christou. I'm the host today for a very, I think, very special lecture that we're going to have, which is part of the Formgivers lecture series at the CAS at London Metropolitan University. That's organized by James Payne. But he's asked me to host this one because we're going to listen to two young Korean guys who are good friends, and they were students that I was teaching together with Florian Bagel a few years ago, and they've just started their practice in South Korea. So it's really, I'm really excited to have this opportunity to present these guys, the first works of these guys to you, and I can see that there are a number of Koreans watching. That's wonderful. Welcome. And also lots of friends. I can see faces, and Viola is in, looks like has an Italian background and so on. Great. So I want to give you a short introduction. Mincheol Lee and Jusin Park founded this practice called ParkLee Studio 3 years ago in 2017, and it's a kind of a fledgling practice, which Mincheol is primarily doing the working process of the projects in Seoul, and Jusin is living in London and working at David Chipperfield Architects. So it's a kind of a well, they will explain that how they work. As I said, I knew first of all Jusin in 2014-15 when he studied at the CAS and did a one-year master's, and he did a most beautiful project in Evora near the Quinta de Malagueira project of Alvaro Siza. And Mincheol the following year came and did another one-year MA with us, and worked in Naples. And both of these guys are devoted and talented, but totally into architecture, and they are looking at architecture around the world with a kind of voracious appetite, and they are doing it with an architect's eye, and thinking about turning what they see into architecture. They're not looking at it as tourists or as journalists. So that's really important. And so their talk is going to be called Form Found from the Ordinary. I guess it's also a little bit of a play of James's title, Formgivers. They're talking about form finders, finding form somehow, and coming from the things that they see and can understand in the environment that they're living in. They say in their text that they've given, finding forms in the ordinary scenery that we find around us. And I guess that's what the lecture is going to be talking about, how they translate some of these qualities into their architectural projects, how they see things, and then how they translate them, and how much of it of that spirit they can give it into the project. I'd say one more thing, that so the two of them, they were studying together in Korea, at Korea University before coming to London, and so they're old friends, and I guess the hope is that they will continue to work together for many years. I hope so too. So I'd like to introduce Mincheol Lee and Jusin Park, and they wanted to also say something about what that music was that we were just listening to. So maybe I'll let them start by explaining that. Yeah, Mincheol, or?
Yeah. Actually, when I got a mail about the music list, I asked my wife, and she recommended the first song is a song about missing the someone who loves, but it's about she said it can be the good list in this situation. We are expecting some good days, so she recommended it, and I suggested it. And the second song is the very modern playlist. They are the traditional singers, but they try to make a crossover music. And the lyrics talking about the tiger. Tiger is coming from the mountain. It is very old songs. It can be, yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good to hear that. Yeah, they were nice. They were very Korean, weren't they?
Yeah. Okay, maybe Mincheol, you can start.
Okay. Can I share the monitor now?
Yeah.
It is great pleasure to be part of the Formgivers lecture series. Many thanks to James and Phil and Architecture Foundation for inviting us for a talk. I'm Mincheol, talking from the other side of the world, Seoul, Korea. Probably the speaker from the most far distance so far on the 100 Days Studio. We are very young, fresh architecture research studio based in Seoul, Korea. ParkLee Studio was founded in 2017 spring together with myself and Jusin. After getting some small house project in Korea, we do mostly residential project, but sometimes do competitions as well. Now, Jusin will open the talk by sharing our personal interest on architecture.
Yeah, hello all. I'm Jusin, and I'll start the talk by sharing some interesting architectures that we like and we found from our daily scenery, and then we'll move on to the projects. So what we're interested in is finding forms from ordinary scenery around us. It's sometimes from the building, or sometimes from city or landscape, even from seeing how ordinary people live in their daily life. And Mincheol and I, as Phil introduced us, we met 14 years ago as a first-year architecture student in Korea. And we became very close friends, and we always talked about architecture, thinking about those stuff, sharing everything. And one of the things we very much enjoyed was just, wandering around the street of Seoul and discovering very interesting architecture from the ordinary places. And this building with the billboard on top is one of the fascinating pieces of architecture that we found near Seonsanga in central Seoul. And it has very interesting blank wall to one side with concrete structures revealed like a painting. And to the other side, it's very sculptural and three-dimensional. And you can see there are 3 volumes stacking on top of each other in an awkward way. So the middle one is somehow cantilevered from below. And on top of this volume, there is roof terrace for the upper floors, which again has different character. And the billboard is sitting on top of the building with its own steel structure. The whole thing is very somehow accidental and, but still, making very interesting composition. And it reminds us, Cy Twombly's sculpture somehow, even. And the next photograph shows a junction of 5 alleyways. The building with orange signage to the right is a grocery shop. It has a wall that is actually taller than the building behind, attached to the traditional Korean house. And the reason why it's exaggerated slightly is probably to emphasize the public character, like Renaissance church. And the yellow building behind is called a grandma's noodle restaurant. And the form of the building is shaped by the angles of the street. It's almost like a boat with a heavy body and lightweight rooftop. And we thought this space has a very strong urbanistic character, defined by very civic buildings. And the next one is a small building, very sculptural, sitting on the corner of the street with a very strong presence. It can be seen as a conglomerate of 3 very heavy and rigid volumes sitting on a plinth. The building is used as a residential building before, but now it's renovated as a small private gallery with a new life. And the next one is a staircase of residential building, which we found just close to our university, which you can actually see at the back. And this communal external staircase is made out of very simple concrete structure. However, maybe one living on the rooftop someday added its own roof in corrugated metal, supported by very cheap metal structure. And overall, this intervention makes the figure very special. Also, if you look at it carefully, you can find a lady sitting on her chair, maybe waiting for someone by the entrance. And we are also interested in, observing the ordinary streetscapes. In alleyways, we can easily encounter someone like this old man who brings his own chair and sitting outside, right on the street, maybe waiting for someone or chatting with his neighbors. You can see that this man even built his own roof attached to probably his building, to have a sheltered semi-public space. And there's full of life in all these small streets of Seoul. The ordinary architecture we like is accidental and free in its form, but also functional, having always a reason. These are the drawings that Mincheol has archived as part of our personal research. However, sadly, we are losing, those ordinary spaces and places, and in every day. And maybe this is part of why we have affection on the things that is built by the ordinary. This photograph is an area that I used to pass by, but there was a huge residential development and now it's completely demolished. Okay, now we are going to move on to the projects, and I would like to show our most first house project that is built in rural area of Korea. And the client is a young couple who wanted to build a house for 3 generations, but the budget was extremely low. So it was actually a big challenge for us to take the project. However, after talking with the client, we became very enthusiastic and excited about the fact that we can build something with low cost construction and materials that we found from the other ordinary buildings. The site, this is a site map showing our site with a red dot. This site is shows very typical rural landscape of east side of Korea, where there is a field surrounded by small mountains and hills. And on the lower part of the ground, the river across the field. And by the river, there is village, towns. And our site is close to the slope from north to south, sloping down. And because of its location, one can enjoy different views from our site. For example, this is view from our site looking south, and there is a view to a distance, seeing the silhouette of mountains across the field. And to east and west, one can see the trees of the hills in a closer distance. The traditional architecture brings the nature in different ways into the building. For example, this is a photograph taken by myself from the inside of the most beautiful temple in Korea. And here you can see how the building brings the landscape from a distance into the interior. You can see the layers of mountains fading away. And traditionally, we call this type of view and attitude as borrowing the nature. And in a closer distance, the building uses outdoor space in a more active way. From this photograph, you can see the wall and a garden in the foreground. This garden is called as madang in Korea, madang. And this is actually not just a garden, it's something between garden and yard. And it's usually not grassy, but earthy, and sometimes with allotments or plantings. And behind the wall, you can still have a view opening further out to the distance. And so this is site plan, looking at our site closely with, drawing and observing all the vegetations, fields, and streams to the left. So there are two hills on east and west, sloping down towards the stream. And our site is sitting just next to the road, which is the only access to our site. This is a section sketch cutting east and west, just thinking about how the building could sit between the hills. And this drawing is actually one of the most important drawings in the process of developing the project. And this sketch shows a building simply with a wall and sheds. Wall is an element that reacts to the road. It's not only standing on the edge of the garden for privacy, but also brought into the building as a blank wall, recessed from the street. And the reason of doing this is to offer small space to the public. This space, this small space, can become a place, maybe with an apple tree, where a child living in the house waits for his friend and gathering with his friends or something like that. Then behind the wall, there is two sheds that respond with different landscapes. One facing south with a view from a distance, and then the other, the long volume, opening up to east and west, having access to the madang, the garden and yard space with a wall behind. The language of wall and shed can be found not only in traditional architecture on the left side, but also the right photograph is taken just next door of our site, and you can find it everywhere in rural area. And give me 1 second. So after doing that conceptual sketch and exploring and observing the site, we developed designing two sheds further. And one shed is like an entrance building close to the road, and the other one is a shed simply, containing all the bedrooms and living room. The entrance shed was developed by using ordinary elements in a slightly unusual way. That turns the architecture into something special. The roof here protrudes like Leverant's flower shop that provides canopy to the entrance and protects southern light to the dining space. So this would be a view from your dining room looking south, bringing and borrowing the nature into your table probably. This is a sketch of the other shed that, and when we were developing the other shed, we wanted to make a living room not as an enclosed room, but as part of the loose circulation space, also opening to both east and west side and having access to madang to the right. This is a sketch showing our idea about madang. Maybe there is a wall drawn with brown charcoals, framing a view that has the layers of different things behind. So you can see madang at foreground, with the allotment to the right and flower garden maybe to the left. And behind the wall, there's still a view looking out to the trees of the hill on the east side. This is a sketch of a proposed plan, and it had been developed carefully by observing and feeling the surrounding landscapes. We very much liked this plan personally, as each space has its intimate relationship with the context, but also they sit well next to each other, forming a good relationship between rooms. This is a south elevation from a distance. And this is seeing the house closer. So two sheds are merged as one building somehow, making a figure. And this is a view from a road where you see the blank wall with a small apple tree, and the dotted line shows the wall, and behind the wall you see the madam with the wall standing like a columns. And this is not our project. It's by Fernando Tavora, which was very important reference for us. While we were developing the design and even struggling with the construction problems, this reference had been inspiring us a lot, continuously, in many aspects. First of all, the language of this architecture is humble and somehow even ordinary, vernacular. However, it makes very good architecture, a good house. This is a view from the entrance, and what we see from this view is a simple volume to the left, which is a living and dining building with a chimney, yellow chimney. And there is a wall to the right side, a small wall with a small volume that defines the entrance porch of the house, guided by the pavements on the ground. And above the entrance roof, you can see the skylight lightening the entrance inside. This is a view from the garden where you see two simple volumes with a gap in between. Both buildings have recessed area at each end that gives use of outdoor spaces to the garden. This plan is very intriguing. The living room block somehow is slightly tilted, so that somehow when people enter the house, this volume is facing the entrance and somehow welcomes people. But it also makes the garden side looser and more relaxed. And this is a view, interior view of the dining space, where you have a small window, the concrete framed window to the right side, horizontal window, looking out the porch, where you can see people entering the building or leaving the house. And the wall behind the dining table is not touching the ceiling, it's a lower wall, so that the entrance space behind is part of the living space. Beautiful house. So coming back to our project, after completing concept design, which you just saw, the single story, two shed building, we had faced several issues, and one of the issues was to change the brief, and client wanted to add a loft to the building. And our first immediate response to that was to make the entrance building taller and keep the other volume as a single story. And this is the elevation of the south side. But for us, somehow it was not convincing, because it had a character of suburban architecture, not rural kind of feeling. So we went back to our initial idea of house with a wall and shed and tried to develop it with the loft. And this is a view from southeast corner, where you can see a blank wall still with a protruding roof and a different volume to the left side. So the loft will be in the left side of the front volume. This is a view of the Madang with concrete columns and the loose interior space behind the columns. This is northeast view where you can see the window of the loft. This is the plan, how it sits in the context. And we made a photo montage to see how the vegetation might grow and how the building will look like with all the landscapes. This is interior view we made, and this view is from the entrance. So when you enter the house, you see the kitchen and dining to your right side with a corner window opening to the Madang. And behind it, you see the living space to the left behind the stair, opening up to the west as well. And at the end of the corridor, you see a room which is not, an enclosed room, but still part of this loose circulation space. And then we submitted our design to client, but we received a really bad news saying that project budget was cut by 20%. And this had a significant impact to our project. We were initially very disappointed, obviously, about the situation, and even thought maybe we have to pull down the project, just step out. But we both didn't want to see project disappears, as maybe it was our first project or whatever. And we had a lot of discussions together. And the most of the discussion was what we have to give up and what we don't want to give up, and what we have to keep it in this project. And it kind of raised fundamental questions for us as a young architect. What is a good architecture, and what makes a good house? And we thought about this a lot, and we debated about this a lot. And at the end, we thought maybe the good plan, the good layout, which responds with outside walls from inside, maybe was the most important thing. So we even had explored a option where volume becomes really simple. But by doing that, we can use maybe materials that we want, and we can have nicer finish, we can save budgets. But we thought it's important to have a house which have a strong relationship with the landscape in this case. So we changed the design slightly, changing the proportion, giving up windows we liked, and proportion of the windows changed. And like small things like corner windows that I showed you before from the interior image disappeared. And material-wise and structure-wise, we were thinking about concrete structure with concrete columns, the walls facing Madang, but that also disappeared. So it became a very simple timber building. But you can still see the view to the south, seeing the mountains further back through different types of windows. This is a view from the kitchen, where you still have the small window looking out the front yard space. And to the right, there's a big window looking outside to a distance. This is a view when you enter the house. So you can still see Madang with this big window. And there's still relationship between dining space and living space through the stair. But as we lost the visual connection, it somehow is not like before. And this is a view from further away from the building, from south looking north, and you can see the building sitting between the hills. This is view from north looking down south. So the building, the loft became a bit taller, and the windows from the house became all smaller. But you can still see the mountains from this view. And our building became vertically kind of more prominent, but maybe it's okay. Yeah. this is a view from southeast corner. So you still have a wall, blank wall with a small window. And garden wall, actually this was client's idea to make a garden wall like half visible. And we just accepted it because maybe it's good to allow client to do something by themselves. So, yeah. And this is a view from the east, looking the blank wall and a madam space.
Okay, I will start again. This is the second project, house with two figures we did. The client was father of our friend. One day he called us and asked the small cottage with his gardens. The size of asked cottage was about 76 square meters, very small. Also, given budget was very low, it was about £1,000 per square meters. The site is located in the valley between two mountains. We can see the long valley from the site leading to the south side. The landscape and site condition was differently interesting to previous project. This is the road to the site surrounded by the beautiful fields. When you arrive the small village, you will see quite old traditional houses. Also, we can see the shed with blue roof, where is essentially our site. This is the one of most impressive photograph for us, where you see one tall maidenhair tree standing just next to the shed. The shed is single story, very humble and horizontal. With the shed, the beautiful tree has a dramatic scene. This scene made me imagine seeing a view from a small tower. This is from foggy day, looking down the hill from the site, seeing the leaves across the field and silhouette of the mountain. This is the very long section showing rear side of the site to the village and to the mountain on the other side. From the village, the ground slopes up quite dramatically when it comes close to our site. But just behind the site, the ground slopes gently up to the hill. This is our very initial concept model, which shows two figures. One is growing vertical figure, and the other is horizontal figure looking out the fields. We imagined the vertical volume resembling the maidenhair tree, being like a small watchtower, and the horizontal building is like a pavilion, enjoying the landscape around the site. Also, we had to adjust the ground to get the gentle slope. We proposed to approach not directly from the front, but by detouring the site around the allotment from the rear to the pavilion building. In this sequence, one can enjoy seeing the allotment and the view when they enter the building. The horizontal volume is also our response to the neighboring buildings, bringing similar scale and architectural language. From up on the hill, looking up from the site, you can see the valley between two small mountains with several rural houses spread. The composition was developed by making series of small models. We imagined the small tower being something solid and permanent, and single-story pavilion being opened as a lightweight structure. Like the chimney place in Upper Pavilion by Allison and Peter Smithson, We hope the growing figure could be appeared inside of the horizontal spaces. From the staircase, one can see the maidenhair tree through the roof window. This is our reaction to the existing tree that we very much liked. Like we said before, we studied the way to show the growing figure inside the pavilion. Also, we wish the wall for the horizontal spaces could be opened, looking out the landscape. During the process, the client suddenly asked one more room for his mother. We had to explore another option to accommodate the client's request. From the first feeling, we were a little bit frustrated, but we thought that the gap between the growing figure and the small room could be interesting. Also, it has the possibilities to connect the rear side of the architecture and the front garden. In the adjusted plan drawing, we tried to make a gap between vertical volume and small room by arranging a big windows. Also, we want to keep the concept appearing the growing volumes elevation inside. This is the construction photo from the beginning of the sequence. In this scene, we tried to make a relationship between the roof of the old traditional houses and the roof of our horizontal pavilion. This photo is showing the relationship between vertically growing volume and horizontal volume, and also the gap in between. This is the view of the in-between space. The construction process. This is the side elevation facing the steep mountainside. We tried to make a casual face here to accept various changes on the close steep. By using common plywood panel, we tried to make a connection between two volumes, but also by arranging the plywood material going up through staircase, we tried to show the function of this volume inside. As we told before, by appearing a casual roof on the rear side of the building, we tried to make a relationship with existing house buildings on the valley side. The horizontal volume came from ordinary scene, shows the context of this area. Also, the impressive vertical tower appears its own character and makes people enjoy the whole landscape in different way. The house with the hall and the small gardens. This is the third project, and this is in progress now, and the structure is built on the site. The local architect we met in the first project introduced. He introduced us married couple client who wanted to build a house. The husband was an engineer before and asked a very interesting plan layout. He showed us a very radical plan composed of one big hall and very tiny rooms, only for sleep. The size he asked was about 200 square meter, and the budget was £1,200 per square meter. The site condition is a little bit different from previous project. It is located in urban area with irregular alleys. By observing context of the site, we could see a very interesting scenes. There are interesting in-between spaces filled with vegetation spaces between irregular boundary and regular common houses. Because they already asked the hole inside, we tried to give them not a big garden, but divided small gardens found near site. We imagine small volumes surrounding a big hole, facing each characterized gardens. This is site plan showing irregular urban fabric making a small gardens in between spaces. We suggest central big hole surrounded small volumes and gardens. This is the isometric view of the play garden facing 3 big windows. These 3 big windows for 3 children rooms, about 1 by 2 meter size window can be a beautiful frame for garden and also can be a door to play in the garden. This garden was suggested to be composed with low bushes to appreciate east side sun and for children to play. This is the isometric view of backyard for kitchen on northern side. In these drawings, you can see small jars called hangari in Korean to keep some food like kimchi. Like this drawing, we imagine these gardens being used as a kitchen yard. There are no much plant, but only 1 big tree with a small gravel, not to make a pond. And this third isometric view is showing the private and secret garden for couple client. This garden can be used only by the door and staircase from the master bedroom. This lower position also make this garden very enclosed feeling. This is the model photograph showing exterior materials and composition of elevation. This located roof level came from the existing site slope. When you go up to slope, you can meet the play garden with big 3 windows. From the play garden, the land slope will go down and meet kitchen backyard with big kitchen window. 2 roof with earth levels, 3 volumes have different height. If we walk around the gardens, you can meet the secret gardens on the lowest levels, the first 0-point level again. One type of Korean traditional house called 뜰집 has a central square called madang, before Jusin said. As you can see in this plan, the madang space is surrounded with small rooms. The square one below. And these small rooms are connected with timber floor, the hatched area. To make an air ventilation and sun shading, the 뜰집 usually make different leveled planes. Through this process, this one house can be divided as a various area. Like this. By rating with the existing site levels, we tried to make various divided volumes. However, also these 3 life areas will be joined on the central living hall. In our imagination, the hall is the place all family can do something together. So we arranged the small library furnitures on the first level to make a gathering feeling even when they do a different character activity. So this is the plan drawing showing characterized areas and one ensemble living hall. This is the construction photograph. The construction for structure is completed, and this is the living hall living hall view photograph. Various elements are waiting to be finished. When we came to the site with the client, they really liked this long corridor and the big window in the kitchen area. And this is the staircase to go up to the library space. This project is still going on in progress. And the first project, Jusin will introduce it.
Okay, I'll quickly show the last project, which was competition to renovate a town hall in Lund, Sweden, in a very different area, opposite side of the world. And we got a second prize, joint second prize from this competition. So the original building, the Stadhallen, was designed by Claes Anslem, who did amazing architecture around Sweden, south of Sweden especially. And you can, from this photograph, he's Claes Anslem, obviously, and then behind you can see his proposal. And to the left, you can see a bit of existing town hall building. The Lund is a relatively small medieval town, a university town, and currently, and by chance, last week, the Lund was presented already. And you will know about the project as a city if you saw the lecture. And you can, in Lund, you can easily find remnant of medieval urban grains and urban streets and squares as well. And the town hall is in the center of Lund by the main square named Stortorget. And in this aerial photograph, you can see the square with original town hall, which was built around 17th centuries, and Claes Anslem's proposal, which is the triangular shaped building with two almond-shaped hall, which is, one is auditorium and one is hall for the council meeting. And also there is a linear building to the left side, that is also his proposal, which kind of close off the existing block to the left. And to understand Claes Anslem's project deeply, we went back and we stepped back and looked at how the city was evolved. So even from medieval time, you can still see Stortorget, the market square, and the cathedral. And for us, this medieval square has very organic nature, let's say, in a sense that it is not planned by outside or authority, but happened naturally by civic needs. And the square is often part of the street, not something independent and isolated from the others. And in the second diagram, you can see that the town hall was built and Stortorget was enlarged slightly. And to the right bottom side, you can see New Square, which was another new intervention happened in 19th century by, I assume it was by following the demand to have larger open space. And the most right-hand side, you can see Claes Anslem's project sitting next to the town hall. And for us, initially when we looked at Claes Anslem's plan, the building looked a bit too monumental, let's say, the triangular shape and almond-shaped holes inside. But after understanding what happened in this city and looking at this evolution of the urban grains, we felt that Claes Anslem's building is actually a backdrop of the city that is defining the perimeter of the medieval square. And by, sorry Mincheol, can you go back to one more slide? Sorry, because it's more obvious on this side plan. So Claes Anslem's triangular shape is actually still keeping the original medieval square's character, but just pushing it slightly backward, leaving a gap with the original town hall, which even makes looser space around the town hall and his building. So it's part of the city, and the building has a very strong, clear purpose of making a good square open space. And what you see from the street actually is not a big, long facade. It's a very short edge, which is kind of making an ensemble with existing small buildings of Lund. This is a plan of Claes Anschleim. So left-hand side, you can see the ground floor plan, which has foyer, the circular space opening up to the store tollgate. And upper level, there is this almond-shaped halls, and in between space is very loose and is open to the street. It's very transparent. It means the perimeter of the triangular wall is very transparent. And our initial and very immediate response to this was, as Claes Anschleim's foyer was only open to one side, to the store tollgate, we thought maybe the foyer can become part of the square and it can have more openness by opening up the southeast corner to the other side of the city. And by looking at Ben Nicholson's still life drawings, where he drew different objects and elements with a thin line, just overlaying things together, he picks up and reveals, the gap and the relationships between things and finding new figures between those relationships. And this is a sketch which is quite random. We just sketched Giorgio Morandi's still life drawings sometimes and just drew the plan of Claes Anschleim's building in a very abstract way, but also just sketched some possible interventions on the Claes Anschleim's building. And this is our proposed ground floor plan, where now it has a new cutout on southeast side. And this gesture of cutting out the existing building is actually it has intention to bring the new market square, the character of the new market square, overlaying into Claes Anschleim's building, so that the building has the nature of the medieval square, but also the character of the other square in one space. This is a drawing showing a view from southeast corner, which has a cutout on the ground floor. And this is a model of interior seeing from the store tollgate side, looking to the new entrance behind. So we tried to keep things as much as we can, but when we do the intervention, we thought it needs to be shown as a new thing. So the joinery part is the new thing that we proposed. It's, the next slide. And the new intervention, we thought it has to be the new thing because it's a new thing that is not different to the thing that was there. But still, for us, the shape and the figure of the new things were resembling the existing building. For example, the almond-shaped building has a buttress, the structure revealed outside with a clear story on top. Those things were drawn and developed as a furniture of the reception desk, for example. This is a drawing, axonometric drawing, showing the public realm and the ground floor plan. So one with yellow hatch shows the new public route through the building. This is a floor plan, axonometric drawing showing first floor and second floor. And on the second floor, initially, the existing building had all the services on the second floor. So we brought them down to the basement and brought more of back of house space and a new lobby on the second floor to have access to the balcony of the auditorium. This is Claes Anschleim's original sketch and existing condition. where the glazing to the street is very transparent and you see the solid volume of the auditorium. And we thought the ceiling of this in-between space is actually not only part of the upper floor foyer, but it's part of the streetscape. So we thought maybe the ceiling can become like a tapestry where acoustic and a bit of lighting are all integrated and making a very interesting fabric-like ceiling. This is our proposal for the small hall. Previously, it was for formal meeting where it had a permanent steps installed, but we imagined this space being more multifunctional. And this is a model of the main auditorium hall where we keep some of Angelim's design, but do some interventions to have more seatings on the upper level. And this is a view of a second floor lobby. And we added inhabitable wall around the second floor so that it gives a bit of domestic character, but also use for the back of houses. Okay. I think that's it for today's presentation. And thank you for joining our and hearing and seeing our presentation.
Yes, if anyone would like to ask a question, we don't have a lot of time, but maybe we can go over time, I don't know. And then put it in the chat box. I'll just maybe start by thank you very much, Mincheol and Jusin. That was really, really great and really well prepared and very clear. I liked, I learned a lot that I didn't know about your projects. I would like to just discuss a little bit, initiate a discussion a little bit by digging a bit deeper into this idea that you're looking at the, you know, what you call the everyday normal architecture that you find in Seoul and in Korea, but also anywhere else, and try to adapt that and work with it. And then when you spoke about the changes that happened during the process of the design and the changes of budget and the different kind of things that happened with the client requirements that were things that you had to adapt to. My question is, do you think that say with the houses that you showed, the casual look that you talk about is possible that, you know, that changes in the future could be could add to these kind of qualities that you're trying to put into these projects? Changes that come about, you know, for example, the client that built their own concrete block wall.
Yeah, I mean, in the first project, you know, the reason why we were imagining the concrete structure building, and, you know, for example, the blank wall, we thought about blank wall being a concrete wall that, you know, defines the space permanently. But behind it, we were thinking about just using very lightweight timber structures, which can change at some point. But for us, using, you know, differentiating the materials, the time in materials kind of was also an important part of our project. But in reality, it was very difficult because it's much cheaper to do with just one material, which is already in the industry, you know. And with a low budget, extremely low budget, there was no freedom for us to think about those things, really. But in initial drawings and initial schemes, yes, we thought about maybe we leave a bit of room for client to, let's say, build a pavilion or pergola next to the wall or whatever. But in reality, it was very difficult to achieve, I would say.
But isn't it true that in that first project with the house with the wall, you also are discussing with the client that he might enlarge that house?
Yes, yes. So the house, the garden wall actually is not touching the building. It left some space on the north side of the site.
Mm-hmm.
So that side, if they want to do an extension, they could build another part of the house. And we thought about it. And as you've seen the interior image, you know, the corridor goes to the bedroom at the end. And that corridor, we were thinking maybe can connect it to the other part of the new building.
So, like, what I like about that attitude, that the way that you're working, is that there's these different elements of the house, whether they're different materials, like, you know, heavy concrete or not. They're specific, like the one with the house with the tower, the rural cottage house in the mountains, and then the horizontal part, so that one can imagine that they're already an addition or a conglomerate kind of order, the way that you're working, and then so that you can imagine them to be added to or subtracted without losing. I mean, that could actually add to their character that they already have, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I guess I don't mean freely, like just anything could happen, but I think that they lend themselves to expectation of change. You know, that they're not fixed, they're not static, and when they're finished by in the first construction. I think that's a good quality that you in my view, yeah. Is there am I supposed to look at?
There's a question from Francesca Torzo.
Ah, Francesca. Yeah. Welcome, Francesca. Yeah. So can you unmute her?
Sure, she's unmuted now.
Yes, I put on the video. Normally I stay defilated, and I wanted to thank, well, first Philip, because thanks to Philip I got to know you, architect Lee and Park, and I wanted first to thank you for the kindness and gentleness of your narration, your narrative. It was beautiful to listen to you. And my question in a way also relates to what Philip was observing. And when you were talking about the first images of your daily context and then how it reappeared in your projects until the Lund one, that may be exotic for you, the other way around, but there is a kind of continuity. And it was coming to my mind some images from late spring by Ozu, this Japanese film director. And I know all these cultures are different, no? Korea, China, Japan, but there is a beautiful scene where there are a father and a daughter and a low table, and all the filming, the site is low, and it is a view through those spaces which exterior again, and is a kind of babushka of spaces. And I saw also in your project, it's like if there are instances living together in a way independent and interlaced. So my question is, if you could say something more about your relation to tradition and how you read tradition. What is the meaning you find in tradition?
Yes, can I answer? Mincheol, do you have anything to say, or I can?
I didn't hear the last sentence because maybe the
link was bad.
Sorry.
Say that. What is your relation to tradition, or how your attitude towards and meaning, the meaning of tradition?
Yes. How you interpret? Maybe I can type. Yeah. Is it better?
Yeah, it's okay. Francesca, it's okay. I think we understood.
Yeah. When we see the tradition, when we observe the tradition or try to find something from the tradition, tradition for us, it is can I have a time to think in English? Sorry, I'm really sorry.
I mean, I can share also my thought about that, Francesca. I think for us, tradition is not like a thing that is appearing from one image for us. For us, it's a thing that it's existing in our life, people's life. For example, one photograph I showed you with an old man sitting outside of his, house. It's very strange, isn't it? It's just asphalt street, and he's bringing his chair outside, sitting there. But you can find that actually in a very old villa. If you see a very old villa, there is those kind of atmosphere where people come outside and sit on a very nice timber shelter. But that kind of thing is happening in everyday life, and people, even though they can't build the same traditional type of architecture, they just bring their own chair and do, continue the same life. And for us, seeing those life is all about the tradition.
I totally agree. That's why I was very interested.
Yeah.
It's really it's like if a life of people carry on its own tradition, and it is there when it is alive, and this is very live in also your spaces. There is a fluency which is really refreshing and breathful, and also a lot of layered time inside. So I thank you.
Thank you.
I shade again.
Thank you, Francesca. Very, very good. Is there, Rosie, is there another one? Or
there's a question from James Payne.
Okay.
Hi, thanks Mincheol and Jusin. It was a wonderful talk and a really assured set of first projects, and I think sits really well within the lecture series. My question is really, it's for both of you, and in some ways also for Philip, and it's really to talk a little bit more about the relationship between this quite special relationship, I think, between ARU and yourself and other Korean students coming to London, and because it seems to me that it's really like a two-way, very much a two-way kind of conversation. And for example, I remember very well Florian talking about emptiness and the concept of emptiness in Korean culture and architecture. And I just wonder whether you could all say something about that very special link.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Jusin.
Yeah. So I think when we first came to London and met Florian and Phil, and hearing what they were saying, especially about time and the emptiness as well, we were very surprised, because that is actually what we can find from Korean architecture. And we didn't want to make, strong, and we didn't want to say, and when we say about Korean architecture, I don't want to define it as, vernacular architecture from East Asia. I want to show, how those spaces has a quality and, the contents of it, you know what I mean? And Florian actually had those ideas strongly, and maybe that's why Florian had fell in love with Korea. But so we were very surprised, and we learned a lot from Florian and Phil. And it was not only us being a Korean, but it was about the person coming to London. And Florian's all those ideas about time and emptiness is all about life, not only about architecture, isn't it? And that, warm ideas came into us, and it built our, fundamental attitude, let's say.
I can really see it in the work and in the representation and the way you're drawing landscape and sketches. It's really, it's really beautiful to see.
Thanks.
And Florian and I, we have only learned all those things from travels in Korea and having Korean good friends, you know, but we could only make those ideas rhyme with what we know when we look at Giorgio Morandi or Richard Serra or something, you know, but it's so powerful in Korea and so deep in the culture, in the, you know, in the since ancient times, you know, that and in the everyday life somehow in the way that modern Koreans are, it's still there. And so, but we were just learning the first sort of the first rung of the ladder, you know.
Yeah.
Really. There's one other aspect of your what you've been doing with these little houses, and I know that you've also been doing a lot of like little interiors and things, haven't you, that you didn't speak about. It's following on from this idea about the everyday life and the living quality. You're designing these spaces like the kitchen or the entrance or so as a kind of almost like Hugo Herring would, like from the inside out, almost like a kind of from the way that one would experience those specific spaces and the qualities that they would have and the view that you would get. However, I think that you're not doing it in a kind of functionalist way or something. You're not doing it in a way. It's very much related, not just to itself, but to the outside or to the next space adjacent to it. And in that way, I think even the building is, although it's kind of very Korean, like a kind of this house that sort of stands there out on the field, and as a kind of object, it loses that sense of objectness by the fact that it's very much related to the mountains or the fields or the road, or I think by the fact that you've done this process of working from the way of life. Yeah. But in the Lund project, it's similarly, you know, a type of contextual understanding that is very actively about experiential and social. Do we have? Did Matthew? Did you want to say something? Matthew Barrack?
Should I unmute Matthew?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see him. Oh, MB.
Yeah.
I know he was here earlier.
Matthew, are you there? Oh, I mean, he just said thank you, really. There's lots of people that have said thank you.
We have one question to senior architects. When we did first project, as I said, the outcome, you know, the look of the building is what we didn't expect. You know, when we made the model and drawings, we carefully thought about proportions and so on. But at the end, it was totally different to what we drew. And at some point, we had to accept building is going along with, you know, by its own way, you know, and we were losing control somehow. Maybe it's coming from the fact that we don't have enough experience, you know, having a good relationship with clients, you know, convincing them and contractor and so on. But what we felt in the process was, does this really care, you know? If we have a good plan and if we, you know, provide a good way of life to them, which is very architectural as well, but losing those control on architecture, maybe, you know, it sometimes maybe can go more into, you know, interesting route or path, I don't know. And to what extent, you know, we have to control the architecture, And Mincheol and I, we said when we were doing the first project, we said, we're never going to publish this building. But we are now showing the project to you. So I don't know. I mean, it's a question.
That was part of my first question about, you call it losing control, but it's like, you hand over the building and you've lost control anyway. Like they're going to sort of demolish it if they want,
Yeah.
That's what I want to know is how the building can evolve in time from what you've set up, the agenda that you've set up in the project,
Yeah.
And the strength of the plan, for example, say, could be enough to make something enduring,
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone that wants to ask a question, or are we?
We have a kind of few just thoughts from Julian Lewis and Noha Baruti.
Julian, you want to speak?
I'm thinking we need to wrap up pretty soon, if that's okay. But I'm going to just bring up Julian if he wants to say a few words.
Hi.
Julian?
Yes, I'll be quick, but thank you for that lecture. I really enjoyed it, and I found a number of fascinating issues. And actually, the one thing one of the things I noticed was your comment about ordinary materials.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly appreciated the compromises you had to take on, and your comment about using ordinary materials to make something special seemed convincing to me, and it just made me wonder whether you could imagine sustaining that approach as your buildings get bigger, as there's more repetition, because the houses are kind of quite special shapes and you've done those very sensitively. But if you imagine making a tower or a big block of houses, could you remember all of these compromises? Could you imagine enjoying the compromises and the material compromises? Feels to me like you could, actually. I'm kind of answering it for you a little bit, but
yeah,
can you imagine enjoying that even more?
Yeah, I mean, there's one English architect we really like, who is Eric Lyons, who worked for Span Development. And, his project's not tower, but he did a lot of housings, isn't it? And when we see his housings, it's not just a machine to live in. It has beautiful landscape outside. The architecture itself, the materials, and the detail is not, like a master's piece, but it's a good house, I think. And maybe that kind of way could be another, path when we have that kind of project commissioned. But maybe we're going to fail. But I don't know. But yeah, I think that's the thing we have to explore. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question. When you were speaking, for example, about the Tavera house that you showed as a kind of reference, yeah. I was struck by the fact that you were seeing that house through the eyes through your own eyes, through your kind of Korean eyes, yeah. And that house was, similar to the house that you're trying to design. Like, it's not that you're trying to design a house that looks like Tavera. It has those qualities that you can recognize, like the qualities that those everyday houses have in Korea. Yeah. And I just can you say something more about how you're looking at architecture, either whether it's by architects or not, that is coming from other parts of the world and other cultures?
I mean, yeah, I think that could be answered with the answer we did for James's question, saying we know there is a culture, and we have understanding that we have to feel the culture and know the ground, know the context to understand the architecture. But once we have the background to understand something, I don't think there's difference between Korean architecture and Portuguese architecture sometimes. It's doing the same thing. It's case by case is different, and it's delivering, you know, the same message sometimes. So maybe, you know, we grew up in Korea, came into Europe. Maybe this multicultural background gives us understanding about, yeah, culture is not that important. It's about the essence, you know, within the space. And sometimes it's the same. So, yeah.
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 That's very good. Yeah, maybe we could end with that. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else? Well,
I think no, unfortunately, Philip, or we're going to get edited. We'll be brutally edited otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, you guys, and thank you everyone for watching. That was really good. I'm very pleased. Thank you very much, and ciao.